Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to today's Protecting Your Profits call. I'm Zach Myers with the Center for Dairy Excellence. Thank you for taking the time to join us on our Protecting Your Profits webinar today. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box by clicking on the chat box at the bottom of your screen and type your question. After the presentation is over, you can unmute yourself if you're on the phone and ask a question directly, or if you're on the webinar and want to verbally ask first, just type it in the chat box. This is being recorded, so it will be available as soon as the recording is available. If you miss anything, or if you know others that would want to listen to it, you can pass on the link to them once you get it. My goal today is to provide an overview of current dairy markets and to review risk management opportunities. Most all of this is public information, and while I may express some opinions, these are certainly not recommendations. So just an agenda like we normally do, this is what I plan on covering today. I did mention in an email that I sent out to the email list that I would be talking about some of the results of the dairy survey that we just released, but in the interest of time and wanting to go over the milk production and farm numbers, I decided to leave that out. But I will be recording a podcast this month. So I'll actually have two podcasts this month. One will be on hitting some of the highlights of the dairy survey, and also some more in-depth look at the production 2020 milk production and farm numbers. So keep a lookout for those two podcast invites. Of course, you can find that on Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Podcasts. So if you subscribe to it, you should get an alert saying that it's available. And with that, we'll move on into it. So at 19.2 billion pounds of production in January, U.S. milk production is up over 293 million pounds, and Pennsylvania production is down 1 million pounds to 865 million compared to January of 2020. U.S. cow numbers are up about 85,000 from last January, while Pennsylvania cow numbers are down about 5,000 from last year. The January slaughter data will be available. I think it's tomorrow. The USDA will release that information tomorrow afternoon. Butter stocks are up about 81 million pounds compared to last year. Cheese stocks are up about 45 million pounds. And then December non-fat dry milk stocks are up about 36 million pounds, or 14.5%. So you can see there's a lot of stocks, especially in butter and powder, are growing. At $1.29 per pound, January butter price is down 54 cents compared to last year, and is a significant discount compared to international prices. Both the global dairy trade and the European Union prices are well above our domestic price. Cheese price is down 33 cents a hundredweight compared to last year, and is again a discount compared to international prices. At $1.18, non-fat dry milk is 9 cents cheaper than last year, and is lower than the global dairy trade price, but is higher than the European Union price. December butter, cheese, and powder production are up about 22, 5, and 40 million pounds respectively. Surplus milk is making it showing in increased butter and powder production especially. Butter disappearance is up 5% to 187 million pounds, driven by increases in both exports and domestic usage. At 426 million pounds, American cheese disappearance is down about 5%, driven mainly by decreased domestic usage. Other style cheese is also down about 3% to 679 million pounds. And again, this is mainly due to reduced domestic usage. Milk powder disappearance is up 11% to 212 million pounds, with domestic usage offsetting reductions in December powder exports. Class 3 milk futures for the next 12 months increased slightly from last month. The Class 3 It goes from a low of $15.61 this month to a high of $17.84 next fall, before dropping back to around $17 by the beginning of next year. Class 4 climbs steadily from a low of $13.28 this month to the $16.30s by the end of this year, January of next year. Class 3 for the next 12 months averages $17.18, while Class 4 averages $14.67. So 2020 exports at 2.1 million metric tons of milk solids equivalent set a record for volume, surpassing the previous record set in 2014. Those 2.1 million metric tons were valued at about $6.6 billion, which is the third highest value on record, behind 2014 and 2013, respectively. 16% of total U.S. milk production was exported in 2020, which is roughly equivalent to 1.1 days of production each week. So over 1 day of production each week of the United States dairy production is leaving the borders. I have a couple slides on the milk production and farm numbers reported in yesterday's milk production report. The 2020 production in the top 10 dairy states increased over 2019 totals. The U.S. average increased from 23,395 pounds per cow to 23,777 pounds per cow in 2020. Michigan production increased to an impressive 27,170 pounds per cow, the highest per cow production in the country. Pennsylvania increased from 20,629 per cow to 21,320 pounds per cow per year, which is certainly a step in the right direction, but Pennsylvania is still the third lowest production per cow in the top 24 dairy states. Pennsylvania barely maintained its position of 7th highest total milk production state, but Minnesota is a close 8th and is expected to surpass Pennsylvania this year, depending on what our cow numbers and production does. I'd like to note that Michigan produces more milk with less cows than either Pennsylvania or Minnesota, and the reason Minnesota is expected to surpass Pennsylvania this year is increases in production per cow and perhaps adding a few more cows than what we'll be able to. New Mexico was the only state in the top 10 to maintain its farm numbers. The other 9 states had a net loss of dairy farms over the course of 2020. The U.S. had a net loss of 7.5% of dairy farms, which equates to 2,550 dairy farms total. There are now 31,657 licensed dairies in the country. At 13.9%, Minnesota lost the highest percentage of farms of the top 10, but Wisconsin, for at least the third year in a row, has lost the largest actual number of dairy farms at 610, or nearly 8% of its dairy farms. Pennsylvania lost 5.2% of the dairy farms over the last year. A further reduction of 300 dairies brings Pennsylvania's total dairy farms to 5,430, down from 5,730 last year. Pennsylvania has lost 770 dairies since the end of 2018. No state in the union had a net gain in dairy farms last year, and only 11 were able to maintain dairy numbers. The other 39 states had an overall net loss. South Carolina lost the highest percentage of dairies in the country at 22.2%, falling from 45 dairies to 35 dairies. So with not many dairies left in that state, 10 dairies makes a big difference in the percentage. So overall, there was a reduction across the country in dairy farms, even though milk production increased. So moving on to dairy margin coverage, the December margin was announced at $8.78 a hundredweight, which will trigger a 72 cent per hundredweight indemnity. After premiums and fees, DMC in 2020 provided a net benefit of about 54 cents per hundredweight at the $9.50 margin coverage. January's margin will be announced Friday and is expected to be below at least that $9.50 coverage, if not further. So looking at these graphs, these are the numbers that I put together to look at on a monthly basis. The projected DMC milk price trigger from a U.S. all milk standpoint, the blue line in the top left graph is expected to average $20.30. This month, the $19.06 average you see in the orange line is an estimated or a projected class 3. And I calculate that based on a 5-year average of class 3 milk price being $1.24 a hundredweight, less than the U.S. all milk price. So again, that $1.24 is a 5-year average difference between the two. So subtracting that $1.24 gives the estimated class 3 trigger. So this is my number. It's not a USDA number, so it certainly isn't something that is guaranteed, but gives you an estimate of what a class 3 might need to look like, or in order to, or be lower than, in order to set an indemnity. So looking at the graph, the blue line on the bottom left, that is the yesterday's closing prices for class 3, and they're supposed to average for the next 12 months for the year $17.12. So that January price is the actual class 3 closing price, and then February through the end of the year is a projected class, or the futures price. So with the difference between $19.06 and $17, even though that $19.06 may not be spot on, does indicate that that there will be DMC payments through much of this year, if not all this year. So looking at the graph on the right, this is from the Dairy Markets and Policy webpage, which is also supported by the USDA. They're projecting a near 100% probability that DMC will provide a net benefit for 2021 if you're a dairy farm that signed up at the $8 up to the $9.50 margin coverage. So taking a quick look at enrollment numbers. The U.S. 2021 participation increased by 27% in number of dairies and 16% increase in production covered compared to 2020, with 18,679 dairies representing 162 billion pounds of production history, and roughly 50% of the dairies enrolled in Pennsylvania. 1,669 dairies representing about 5 billion pounds of production history are enrolled this year, and this represents 27% of the dairies. So a quick note on these dairies: the USDA in its weekly report uses the dairy figures at the end of 2018 to begin 2019, which was the start of the DMC program year. So that 27% of the dairies is based on 6,200 dairy farms at the beginning of 2019. So if you wanted to find out what the actual percentage is based on the number of dairies we have today, then it would be increased slightly. So that Pennsylvania participation has increased 76% in number of dairies over last year, and 63% in production compared to 2020. So it's significantly more dairies enrolled in DMC this year compared to last year, which is good. But with 27% of dairies enrolled, we've got a long ways to go to get more dairy farms enrolled and using this risk management tool, which was designed with the size of Pennsylvania dairy farms in mind. Moving on to dairy revenue protection, 100% class 395 price protected floors can be set from a low of around $15.98 to a high of $16.79 for 20 cents up to about 31 cents. Although this is expensive, these are floors that are worth considering, especially if you're not enrolled in DMC, or if DMC doesn't adequately protect your cost of production. On the Class 4 side, a 100% Class 4 95% protected price. Floor can be set from $14.10 up to about $15.67, and the cost of those policies are from around 12 cents up to 23 cents a hundredweight. Of course, volatility drives premium costs, and there's less volatility in Class 4 right now compared to Class 3. So premiums for Class 4 are cheaper than their respective Class 3 quarter comparison. So quick note, and Jacob Thompson, who's on our call this morning, contacted me this morning. He's an insurance provider, and my numbers are slightly different than his. And I just wanted to point out that the source was, I'm not an insurance provider, so the source of my information is I use Rice Dairy's quote generator for Pennsylvania. So it's supposed to be updated daily, but it's not dated, so I don't know exactly what day it's from. I'm assuming it's from the last trading day, but that may not always be the case. But if you're an insurance provider and your numbers differ from mine, then that might be the cause. Is that I just have access to this public quoter and don't have official numbers since I'm not an insurance provider. So just a quick look at some of the dairy revenue protection enrollment. 64.6 billion pounds of milk were covered in the 2020 crop year. Almost 3,100 policies were sold, and 1,700 of those were indemnified and paid about $413 million out to America's dairy farmers. Only 5 of those indemnities were at the 90% protected price, and the rest were at the 95% protected price. So it sort of shows that with a full year of data behind it, that the 95% protected price is where the most indemnities are going to be had if you purchase those policies. 677 million pounds of milk are covered in Pennsylvania. 141 policies sold. 60 of those policies were indemnified and paid about $4.5 million out to Pennsylvania dairy farmers in crop year 2020. For the 2021 crop year so far, 23.2 billion pounds of milk have been covered in the United States, and about a little more than 2,500 policies. 20 of those policies have been indemnified and paid about $178,000 so far. 576 million pounds of milk have been covered in Pennsylvania so far by 133 policies, and 5 of those policies have been indemnified and paid out about $8,500 to Pennsylvania dairy farmers. So just a quick look at a summary. Class 3 prices for the next 12 months are supposed to average about $17.20. This is up 12 cents from last month's average of $17.08 a hundredweight, and is $1.01 higher than the 5-year average of $16.19. Class 4 is averaging $15.33 a hundredweight over the next 12 months, which is 39 cents higher than last month's $14.94, and is 69 cents above the 5-year average of $14.64. December's dairy margin coverage margin was $8.78, triggering a 72-cent indemnity. In 2020, DMC provided a net benefit after premiums and fees of 54 cents a hundredweight, and this equated to about $5,000 net per million pounds of production history, up to that 5 million Tier 1 cap. All milk price triggers for 2020 is projected to average, again, $20.30, which roughly equates to a Class 3 price trigger of $19.06. The last time the U.S. all milk price averaged to more than $20 was in 2014. On yesterday's Class 3 average was $17.12 for the year, indicating that DMC will more than likely pay next year, with USDA forecasting a nearly 100% probability of DMC providing net benefits. So that premiums and fees, of course, that the premium is understood, but that fee is the Congress each year sets a sequestration rate for government payments, and In 2020, that was 5.9. So took another 5.9% off of the total figure to get down to that. It was slightly more than $5,000 per million pounds. That sequestration rate for 2021 is, I think, 5.7%, if I remember correctly. And they've actually locked that in for the next 3 years. So that sequestration rate of 5.6 or 7% is what it will be for the next, well, for the duration of the DMC program. And with that, our next Protecting Your Profits webinar will be Wednesday, March 24th at noon. And at this point, if there's any questions, I haven't looked at the chat box to see if anything has come in through the chat, which it doesn't look like there has, but if there's any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Well, again, thank you for joining today. And as I mentioned on the agenda slide, I will be recording 2 podcasts hopefully later on this afternoon, and so those will hopefully be available tomorrow. One will be on the dairy survey that was released last week, and if you weren't able to join the webinar last Friday, that recording is available on our webpage. If you go to the centerfordairyexcellence.org and then go to PA Goodness, under the menu PA Dairy Goodness That Matters or something like that. It is linked under there if you want to listen and see the report and also listen to that webinar. And then the second podcast, I plan on going in a little more in depth on those 2020 milk production and dairy farm numbers. So with that, thank you. And are you sure there's no last minute questions before I end today's webinar?
Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
On the difference between world prices and U.S. prices, particularly on class 3 price, why the big difference? In other words, why aren't we exporting more of the product if there's that big a difference in price?
In some of those major exporting countries or milk production countries, their production's down, so supply is tighter, which is causing their domestic price to be higher than our price. And of course, we've got a pretty high surplus right now, and so that's the main difference that's driving the price differences between our domestic price and the world price is where we have surplus, a lot of surplus milk. Other exporting countries aren't experiencing that same surplus. New Zealand and Australia are having drought conditions, and each report I see, they're down a little bit from what they were originally projecting, and Germany, France, and I forget the third country in the EU that are major milk producers, their production is down as well.
I had a question for Jake Thompson, not a question, but I would like him to call me. I have a question for him privately.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, again, thank you for joining today's webinar. I'll be sending the link out for the recording. If you missed anything or want to review anything, I'll be sending it out later today or early tomorrow when I have the links for the podcasts as well. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully over the next few days, a lot of the snow will melt, and I don't know anybody else, but I'm hoping spring is around the corner. So hopefully we're in for some warmer weather coming up. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.